Peg Keogh here from College Aid Pro. So today I want to talk about what's known as a prepaid tuition plan. So what this is a college savings account. It's a type of college savings account similar to a 529, but they're similar in the way that it's an account where you can save to pay for college, but it's very different in how it works. So take a few minutes to explain this. So a prepaid college tuition plan is based on the cost of tuition currently. So the concept is you're buying units or whatever that state happens to call it, because different states have their own prepaid tuition plans. So in my state, in the state of Washington, they call them units, but in another state, they might have a different word for them. But what you're doing is you're purchasing units at the current cost of tuition. So the idea is tuition has been going up for decades, as we all know. And so if you have a second grader and you're buying units at the current cost of tuition, and then you cash them out when your child is 18, 19, and 20, the idea is if tuition has gone up, you bought those units at a low price, and then you're cashing them out when they're worth a lot more because tuition has gone up quite a bit. So that's the idea behind it. It's similar to a 529 in that money that you put into that account is now earmarked to pay for qualified education expenses. This is defined by the IRS. It's typically tuition and fees, room and board, and books. Recently, in the last 5 years, they added computer in there. Like airfare to college is not currently considered a qualified education expense. The IRS defines this. So it's similar to a 529 in that way. Once it's in there, it's earmarked for that. So you really can't pull it out for other expenses. If you do, you're going to pay tax on the earnings and you're going to pay a 10% penalty. If those funds are used to pay for qualified education expenses, then you pay no tax on the earnings. As the account escalates, as tuition goes up and your units are worth more, you don't pay money on that gain, and you don't pay money on the gain when you actually take it out. So that's very similar to a 529 because they're both college savings accounts. A 529 is in the stock market. You are investing in mutual funds typically. So that's a big difference between the prepaid tuition plans. Excuse me. Those are, again, they're based on your state, and your rate of return is basically the amount that tuition goes up year after year. So if you get in there when your child's really young, you could have a nice growth. Totally depends on your state. I can't really go into more detail than that because I could go into detail about the plan that we have in the state of Washington. It's called the GET, but the specs on the GET could be very different than the specs on a prepaid tuition plan in another state. Another thing I want to add is that a lot of these type of programs in 2008, when we had 2007, 2008, when we had the market go down quite a bit, a lot of these plans stopped existing because they were linked to the rate of tuition increase, and tuition had gone up a lot, and the states they couldn't support the increase that the investors were getting due to tuition going up. So some of them, they just left that space. So you should check with your state and see if they even have a prepaid tuition plan. And if they do, how it works. It's very specific. It's very important to look into the specifics of your state. The other thing to realize is you can't look across the whole country. Kids that live in the state of Washington, where I am, they're eligible for the GET. A student that lives in Oregon is not eligible for the debt. That's another difference between 529s, because a 529, most states have one and anybody can invest in it. It's not just kids that live in that state. So that's another key thing. The good thing about that is you only need to research the prepaid tuition plan if it exists in your state. and see if it makes sense. And what I would do is compare it to the 529 option. When my kids were younger, I actually had money in both. It was different because it was pre 2008, but pre the market meltdown when I started. So different reasons for me to have both. But again, depends on your state and depends on your situation, what you want to do if you have funds to save for college. And last piece to let you know is, since this falls under that umbrella of a college savings account, when you're submitting financial aid forms, if you're the owner as the parent, this will be considered an asset of yours, just like a 529, as opposed to being an asset of the student. And that's a good thing because parental non-retirement assets are assessed at a lower rate than the student's assets. So that's a good thing and completely the same as a 529. So if this is something that is landing for you and might be of interest, go ahead, Google your state, see if you have a prepaid tuition plan, and look into the specifics of it and see if that's a good option for you to save for college. And as always, happy planning.